"Open up, Mr. Morrison, your wife's under arrest." The pounding on our front door shook the whole house so hard I thought the glass would shatter. Coffee splashed across my kitchen counter as I rushed to the window. 2 patrol cars sat in our driveway, red and blue lights painting our quiet neighborhood like a crime scene. My wife Rita was already walking to the door in her bathrobe, completely calm. After 18 years of marriage, I knew that look. She wasn't worried. She was amused. "What's the charge, officers?" she called out. "Electrical violations, ma'am. Running an illegal business from your residence." Behind those 2 young cops stood Constance Pemberton, our psycho HOA president, grinning like Christmas morning. 6 months of harassment had led to this moment. Poor woman had no clue what she'd just walked into. What would you do if your HOA tried to destroy your family? Drop a comment below. Here's how this nightmare started. 6 months earlier, everything seemed perfect in our little slice of suburban paradise. I'm Jake Morrison, 44 years old, been working as an electrician for 22 years. Started my own contracting business about 5 years back. Nothing fancy, just honest work fixing people's electrical problems and doing renovations around Sacramento. My wife Rita? Well, neighbors thought she worked some boring government desk job. She'd leave every morning in business clothes, come home around dinner time, never talked much about work. The truth was a little more complicated than that, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We'd bought our house in Willowbrook Heights 3 years earlier. Corner lot, nice neighborhood, tree-lined streets where kids actually rode bikes and neighbors knew each other's names. The HOA fees were reasonable, $120 a month, and the board seemed to mind their own business. The smell of fresh sawdust from my weekend projects mixed with the aroma of Rita's morning coffee ritual. She had this routine where she'd sit on the back porch with her mug, watching the sunrise before heading off to her government job. The sound of her duty boots on our hardwood floors during those early morning hours became as familiar as my own heartbeat. Everything changed when Constance Pemberton got elected HOA president. Constance was 58, recently divorced, and bitter about having to downsize from some fancy house in the hills to our middle-class neighborhood. Always dressed like she was heading to a board meeting, pressed blazers, leather portfolio, drove a white BMW that she kept spotless. She had this way of speaking in clipped, condescending tones that made you feel like you were being scolded by a disappointed teacher. I first ran into trouble when I mentioned to my neighbor Mr. Arlo that I was planning to build a workshop in the backyard. Nothing crazy, just a small building where I could organize my tools and maybe do some side projects. Mr. Arlo's a retired engineer, great guy, always willing to help with technical advice. Constance overheard us talking across the fence one Saturday morning. The woman appeared out of nowhere like some kind of suburban surveillance ghost. "Excuse me," she interrupted, clutching that ever-present portfolio. "Did I hear something about construction? I'll need to see all permits and documentation immediately." I showed her everything. City permits, architectural drawings, HOA compliance paperwork, all perfectly legal, all properly filed. I'd learned the hard way over the years that crossing your T's and dotting your I's saves headaches down the road. She studied those papers like she was looking for nuclear launch codes. Flipped through every page twice, made notes in the margins, even pulled out a magnifying glass at one point. The intensity was honestly impressive and slightly terrifying. "Everything appears to be in order," she finally admitted, sounding genuinely disappointed. But Rita noticed something I missed. That evening, she pointed out that Constance had been photographing our property from the sidewalk. "That woman acts like someone with something to prove," Rita observed, sipping her evening tea. She had this way of reading people that came from her work experience, though I didn't fully appreciate that skill yet. A few weeks later, I discovered why Constance was so interested in my workshop plans. Turns out she'd applied for a similar building permit 4 months earlier. The city denied her application because her lot was too small to meet the required setback distances. Here's where things get interesting. Remember that feeling when you realize someone's been playing chess while you thought you were playing checkers? That's exactly what happened next. The crunch of gravel under surveyor wheels became a regular sound in our neighborhood. Constance started measuring property lines, taking photos, leaving multiple voicemails about maintaining community standards. She'd show up at exactly 9:15 every Tuesday morning, following the same inspection route, wearing the same navy blazer. Rita started keeping a log of these visits, just casual notes in a little notebook she kept by the kitchen window. At the time, I thought she was just being thorough. I had no idea my wife was building a case file. The first real shot fired in our HOA war came disguised as a community improvement initiative. Constance called an emergency board meeting on a Wednesday night. I didn't attend, figured it was just routine stuff about landscaping or pool maintenance. Biggest mistake of my life. The next morning I found a certified letter taped to our front door. The sound of that official envelope crinkling in my hands still gives me chills. Inside was a brand new HOA rule. Any structure over 100 square feet now required aesthetic committee approval before construction. My workshop, 120 square feet, already built, completely legal when I constructed it, but according to this new rule, I was in violation. $500 fine, 48 hours to comply. I called my buddy Dave, who dealt with HOA disputes before. He laughed when I explained the situation. Jake, they can't just change rules after the fact. California requires 30-day notice and member votes for rule changes. Any lawyer would tear this apart. That's when the real twist hit me. I discovered the aesthetic committee consisted of exactly 3 people: Constance, her sister Margaret, and Mrs. Kowalski, who owed Constance money from some failed investment scheme. The smell of diesel fuel and morning dew became my new reality as Constance showed up every Tuesday at 9:15 a.m. sharp. She'd measure distances to my workshop with a surveyor's wheel like she was planning a military invasion. The crunch of gravel under those wheels echoed through our peaceful neighborhood. Rita found me in the garage that evening, reading the violation notice for the 10th time. "They can't just retroactively punish you," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "Document everything. Dates, times, photos. Patterns of selective enforcement can violate equal protection laws." I stared at her. "How do you know legal terminology like that?" "Government work," she shrugged. "You pick things up." That weekend, I started digging deeper. Found 4 other similar structures in our neighborhood, all built in the past year without any committee review, all mysteriously approved through normal permits. But here's where it got interesting. Margaret Pemberton, Constance's sister, owned Premier Home Consulting, the only approved contractor for committee-required modifications. I spent Saturday going through public records. Premier had done 3 neighborhood jobs over the past year. Average cost? $12,000 each, for work worth maybe $4,000. The harassment spread like a virus. Mr. Arlo got violated for his garden gnome. Aesthetically inconsistent. The Rodriguez family got cited because their kids left bikes on the lawn overnight. Mrs. Patterson, 73 years old, got fined for excessive holiday decorations. She'd hung 3 Christmas wreaths. Every violation came on the same cheap, scratchy paper that left lint on your fingers. That texture became a constant reminder that someone was systematically targeting us. During one Tuesday inspection, I timed Constance's route, 4 minutes per property, 3 photos each, notes in a black composition book. Total circuit, 47 minutes. She skipped 2 houses entirely, her nephew's place, and the family that hired Premier for their deck. Rita helped me organize everything into what she called a proper case file. Her documentation was incredibly thorough, precise handwriting, timestamps, measurements, almost like police reports. "Rita, this is really professional work," I mentioned one evening. She paused. "I've always been detail-oriented." The threat escalated when Constance announced she'd place a lien against our property if I didn't remove the workshop within 30 days. A lien meant we couldn't sell or refinance without paying her arbitrary fine. That pushed me over the edge. I submitted a formal complaint to the HOA board documenting selective enforcement and requesting all committee approval records from the past 2 years. Constance's response was swift and vicious. She called another emergency meeting to clarify policy on commercial vehicles. I didn't even own a commercial vehicle. But 3 days later, I found another violation notice. My work van, parked in my own driveway, was now considered a commercial vehicle violation, subject to $500 in daily fines. The van weighed 8,400 pounds. I checked the HOA rules. Commercial vehicle restrictions applied only to vehicles over 10,000 pounds. When I pointed this out, Constance called yet another emergency meeting. This time, she redefined commercial to mean any vehicle displaying business information. My van had small magnetic door signs with my company name. Rita watched this unfold with growing intensity. One evening, she mentioned that discriminatory enforcement targeting specific residents could constitute harassment under state law. "You really know a lot about this stuff," I said. "I've seen patterns like this before," she replied quietly. What I didn't know was that Rita was building her own case file, one that would eventually destroy Constance Pemberton's little kingdom. But first, things were about to get much worse. The van violation was just the warm-up act. Constance's real masterpiece came 2 weeks later when she discovered environmental warfare. I woke up to another certified letter on my door. This time, she'd declared war on my garden. According to the new violation, my drought-resistant native plants were actually invasive weeds that lowered property values. I had 14 days to replace everything with community-approved landscaping. The approved plant list included only high-water, non-native species. Estimated professional installation cost, $8,000 minimum. The smell of sage and lavender from my water-wise garden mixed with the artificial fertilizer stench wafting from neighbors who'd already surrendered to Constance's demands. The contrast hit you like a slap in the face. I'd spent 3 years cultivating those plants specifically for California's drought conditions. Purple sage, California poppies, native grasses that thrived without irrigation. The city had even given me a rebate for water conservation. Rita found me that evening, standing among my condemned plants with the violation notice in my hand. "This doesn't make sense," I muttered. "These plants are exactly what the state wants us to grow." Rita nodded thoughtfully. "California law actually prohibits HOAs from banning drought-resistant landscaping. It's part of the state water conservation mandates." I looked at her sharply. "How do you know that?" "I read the news," she said, but something in her tone suggested more. That weekend, I dove into research mode. Rita was absolutely right. I remembered reading about this in some legal newsletter years back. HOAs couldn't override state environmental laws, no matter what their little rulebook said. Any association trying to ban water-wise landscaping was violating state regulations. I filed a complaint with the county water district on Monday morning. By Wednesday, they'd opened an investigation into Willowbrook Heights' landscaping policies. But the real twist came when I started following the money. Premier Landscaping Solutions, the only vendor on the approved contractor list, was owned by Marcus Pemberton, Constance's brother-in-law. 3 neighbors had already been forced to hire Premier. The Rodriguez family paid $12,000 for basic yard work. Mrs. Arlo spent $15,000 on plants that died within 6 months. The Johnsons got hit for $18,000 when Premier claimed they needed specialized soil remediation. I spent Saturday afternoon at the county recorder's office diving into business filings. Premier Landscaping had paid Constance $2,400 in consulting fees over the past year. Marcus Pemberton was operating without proper contractor's licensing. The whole operation was a family scam. Rita helped me organize the financial evidence with the same methodical precision she'd shown before. Her ability to spot patterns in the documentation was impressive, almost like she'd done this kind of investigation professionally. "Rita, you're really good at this," I mentioned. "Government work involves a lot of analysis," she replied, not looking up from the spreadsheets. The Water District investigation moved fast. Within 2 weeks, they'd determined that Willowbrook Heights was violating 3 different state environmental regulations. The HOA faced potential fines of $50,000. Constance's response was pure panic disguised as authority. She issued 23 landscaping violations in a single day, targeting anyone with native plants, xeriscaping, or water-efficient irrigation. The neighborhood erupted in fear. People started preemptively hiring Premier Landscaping just to avoid harassment. Marcus was booked solid through Christmas, charging premium prices for substandard work. But Constance wasn't done. She escalated to psychological warfare. I started noticing her at my job sites. She'd park across the street, taking photos while I worked on electrical installations. When homeowners asked about the woman with the camera, I had to explain that my HOA president was stalking me. "Mrs. Morrison," she told one client, "I'm investigating possible safety violations. Your contractor might not be following proper procedures." The texture of my phone buzzing constantly became a new source of stress. Clients calling to ask about safety concerns, potential jobs being canceled because someone had heard things about my work quality. Rita watched this escalation with growing intensity. One evening, she suggested I document my water usage savings and keep detailed meter readings. "Why?" I asked. "Evidence," she said simply. "Pattern documentation is crucial in these situations." "Rita, you sound like you've handled cases like this before." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I've seen how investigations work. Documentation wins battles. The harassment campaign reached its peak when Constance threatened to call city inspectors unless all landscaping violations were resolved within 7 days. That's when Rita's demeanor changed completely. The calm, patient woman I'd lived with for 18 years suddenly had this edge to her voice. "Jake," she said quietly, "I think it's time to let Constance make a bigger mistake." "What do you mean?" "Let her call the inspectors. Let her file false reports. Give her enough rope." I didn't understand what Rita meant at the time, but I was about to learn that my wife had been playing a much longer game than I'd ever imagined. Constance took the bait beautifully. 3 days after our landscaping deadline passed, she made her biggest mistake yet. The rumble of a diesel engine in my driveway at 7 a.m. jolted me awake. Through the bedroom window, I watched a city inspection truck park behind my work van. The smell of exhaust mixed with my morning coffee as I rushed to get dressed. 2 men in hard hats approached my front door. Behind them, Constance stood on the sidewalk with her ever-present portfolio practically vibrating with anticipation. "Mr. Morrison, we're here about reported electrical code violations and possible commercial zoning infractions." My heart sank. She'd actually done it, called in false complaints to city officials. But here's where her plan backfired spectacularly. The lead inspector was Tom Rodriguez, a guy I'd served with in the National Guard 15 years earlier. He recognized my work immediately. "Jake Morrison," Tom grinned, shaking my hand. "Heard you were doing good work out here. Mind if we take a look at this workshop everyone's talking about?" Tom and his partner spent 40 minutes going through my shop with fine-tooth combs. Every connection, every circuit, every permit. The workshop exceeded code requirements in every category. "This is textbook electrical work," Tom announced loudly enough for Constance to hear. "Mind if I get your card? Got some projects coming up." Constance's face went through several shades of purple. She'd expected to watch city officials shut down my operation. Instead, she got to see me receive a professional endorsement. That's when I realized something I should have learned years earlier from my military days. Filing false reports with government agencies is a criminal misdemeanor in California. Constance had just crossed the line from civil harassment into potential criminal territory. Rita met me in the kitchen after the inspectors left. She'd been watching the whole interaction from the window. "How do you feel about Mrs. Pemberton's latest move?" she asked. "Furious," I admitted. She wasted city resources, lied to officials, tried to damage my business reputation. Rita nodded slowly. "Document everything. False reporting to government agencies creates criminal liability." I stared at her. "Rita, how do you know criminal law?" "I've picked up things over the years," she said, but her tone was different now, more authoritative. Constance's humiliation with the city inspector should have ended things. Instead, it triggered her complete breakdown of judgment. She filed a complaint against Tom Rodriguez with the city manager, claiming he was inadequately thorough and possibly corrupted by his relationship with me. She demanded a state housing authority investigation into our entire neighborhood. The sound of Constance's heels clicking rapidly on pavement became a daily soundtrack. Her obsessive behavior escalated beyond anything I'd seen before. She started measuring property lines multiple times per day, taking hundreds of photos, leaving voicemails at City Hall demanding proper oversight. Rita began keeping detailed logs of every interaction. Her documentation was incredibly professional: times, dates, exact quotes, behavioral observations, almost like police incident reports. Meanwhile, the community was fighting back. Mr. Arlo called an informal neighborhood meeting at his house. 7 families showed up with their own violation stories. Mrs. Patterson brought documents her late husband had kept from his time on city council. "According to municipal law," she explained, "HOA boards can't override city code enforcement. What Constance is doing violates separation of authority." The Rodriguez family presented a timeline showing how violations had targeted minorities and working-class families almost exclusively. The pattern was obvious and ugly, but Constance wasn't done spiraling. She hired what she called a private investigator to research neighborhood families. Turns out this investigator was her nephew Danny, 22 years old, no license, no training. His investigation consisted of social media stalking and taking photos from his car. When I discovered Danny had been photographing children at the neighborhood playground, Rita's entire demeanor changed. For the first time in our marriage, I saw something cold and dangerous in her eyes. Photographing minors without parental consent can constitute stalking under state law, she said quietly. Rita, that's very specific legal knowledge. She met my gaze directly. Some things you don't forget. Constance's financial pressure tactics reached new extremes. She increased HOA fees by 40% with only 30 days' notice, claiming enhanced security and maintenance needs. In reality, she was funding Danny's stalking operation and Marcus's landscaping monopoly. 7 families filed formal complaints with the state HOA regulatory board. Mrs. Patterson threatened a lawsuit based on her late husband's municipal law expertise. That's when Constance made her final, fatal mistake. She called the sheriff's department claiming suspicious electrical activity and possible fire hazards at our property. She demanded immediate response and full investigation. What she didn't know was that dispatch automatically routed emergency calls about electrical hazards to the county sheriff's training division, Rita's division. The call came in at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Rita's work phone buzzed on the nightstand. I was already up, making coffee, when I heard her answer with her professional voice. Morrison here. A pause. Then, electrical emergency at what address? Another pause, longer this time. My address? Are you certain? I turned around to see Rita sitting up in bed, fully alert despite being awakened from deep sleep. Her tone had shifted into something I'd never heard before, command authority. Who specifically requested immediate response? She asked. Through the phone, I could hear the dispatcher explaining that a Constance Pemberton had filed an emergency report claiming dangerous electrical activity and potential fire hazards requiring immediate law enforcement response. Rita was quiet for several seconds. When she spoke again, her voice was ice cold. Dispatch, this is Sheriff Morrison. I'm going to handle this personally. Send Officers Martinez and Thompson to my residence for follow-up. Sheriff Morrison. The words hit me like a freight train. Rita, I managed to croak. She looked at me, and for the first time in 18 years of marriage, I saw my wife clearly. Not Rita the government worker, Sheriff Rita Morrison. I was going to tell you, she said quietly, but this works better. Tell me what? That I've been building a criminal case against Constance Pemberton for the past 6 months. My coffee mug slipped from my hands, shattering on the kitchen floor. The smell of spilled coffee mixed with the scent of Rita's duty gun oil, an odor I'd never consciously noticed before but suddenly realized had always been there. You're the sheriff, I said stupidly. County sheriff, she confirmed. 18 years in law enforcement, the last 3 running the training academy. The officers coming here, I trained them both last month. That's when everything clicked. Rita's legal knowledge, her documentation skills, her calm under pressure, her strategic thinking. The sound of patrol cars pulling into our driveway interrupted my mental recalibration. Rita stood up, moved to our bedroom closet, and pulled out her duty uniform. In 3 minutes, she'd transformed from my government worker wife into Sheriff Rita Morrison. Jake, I need you to stay calm, she instructed, strapping on her duty belt. Constance just escalated this into criminal territory. Filing false emergency reports is a felony when it involves claims of immediate danger. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed documentation of her harassment pattern without any suggestion that we were building a law enforcement case. If she'd known my profession, she'd have been more careful. Rita walked to our bedroom window and looked down at the patrol cars. Officers Martinez and Thompson were approaching our front door, with Constance hovering behind them like a vulture. She has no idea what she just walked into, Rita said. The doorbell rang. Mrs. Morrison, came the voice through the door. Sheriff's Department. We have reports of electrical violations. Rita looked at me. Ready to end this? I nodded, still processing the fact that I'd been married to the county sheriff for 3 years without knowing it. Rita opened the door in her full uniform. The expression on Constance Pemberton's face was worth every moment of the past 6 months of harassment. Good morning, officers, Rita said calmly. I believe there's been a misunderstanding about the nature of this call. Officer Martinez's eyes widened. Sheriff Morrison, we didn't know this was your residence. Yes, Martinez. And I think Mrs. Pemberton has some explaining to do about filing false emergency reports. The color drained from Constance's face so fast I thought she might faint. The next 2 hours changed everything in Willowbrook Heights forever. Rita invited Officers Martinez and Thompson inside for coffee while Constance stood frozen on our front porch like a malfunctioning robot. The sound of her rapid breathing was audible from 10 feet away. "Officers," Rita began, settling into her kitchen chair in full uniform, "Mrs. Pemberton has been conducting a systematic harassment campaign against my family for the past 6 months. What she filed this morning constitutes a false emergency report." Officer Thompson opened his notepad. "Sheriff, do you want to press charges?" "Not yet," Rita replied. "I want to show you something first." She disappeared into our home office and returned with 3 thick file folders. When she spread them across our kitchen table, I realized I'd been watching a criminal investigation unfold without knowing it. "Jake," Rita said, "remember all those times I suggested documenting things? All those questions about legal procedures? I've been building a case file." The documentation was incredible. Time-stamped photographs of every violation notice, audio recordings of Constance's threats, all perfectly legal under California's one-party consent law, financial records showing the kickback scheme with Premier Landscaping, video evidence from our security cameras showing Danny's attempted break-in. "Sheriff," Martinez said, reviewing the evidence, "this is felony harassment, fraud, and conspiracy." Rita nodded. "Mrs. Pemberton escalated to filing false emergency reports. That's where this becomes criminal rather than civil." Through our kitchen window, we could see Constance pacing on the sidewalk, talking rapidly on her phone. The texture of panic was written all over her body language. "What's the plan?" I asked. Rita's smile was colder than January. "We're going to let her hang herself completely." Over the next week, Rita coordinated with multiple agencies. The district attorney's white-collar crime division opened an official investigation. The state contractor licensing board began auditing Marcus Pemberton's business. The county water district imposed fines on the HOA for violating environmental regulations. But Rita's masterpiece was community organization. She met quietly with affected families, explaining their legal rights and helping them document damages. Mr. Arlo contributed his engineering expertise, proving that all of Constance's violations were actually compliant with code. Mrs. Patterson provided historical HOA documents showing how Constance had systematically changed rules to benefit her family's businesses. The Rodriguez family documented the discriminatory enforcement pattern, showing how violations targeted minorities and working-class families at 3 times the rate of other residents. "This isn't just harassment," Rita explained during one evening meeting at our house. "It's a racketeering operation using HOA authority to extort money from residents." I watched my neighbors transform from scared victims into organized plaintiffs. Rita taught them proper documentation techniques, legal terminology, and their rights under both state and federal law. But she saved the best strategy for last. "We're going to let Constance call another emergency meeting," Rita announced. "She's going to demand immediate action against our family. She's going to make threats, and she's going to do it all in front of witnesses, media, and law enforcement." "How can you be so sure?" Mrs. Patterson asked. Rita's smile was predatory. "Because I know her psychological profile. Narcissistic personality combined with financial desperation creates predictable behavior patterns. When cornered, she'll escalate rather than retreat." The honey trap was elegant in its simplicity. We'd let Constance believe she was winning by not immediately challenging her latest violations. We'd encourage her to make bigger mistakes while documenting everything for criminal prosecution. Rita arranged for the local newspaper to attend Constance's next emergency meeting. She coordinated with the district attorney's office to have investigators present. She even suggested that Constance invite city officials to witness her evidence against our family. "Won't she be suspicious about all these people showing up?" I asked. "Narcissists love audiences," Rita explained. "She'll think it's validation." The plan required one more week of patience. One more week of letting Constance think she was destroying us while she actually destroyed herself. Rita took her first vacation day in 3 years. "Personal legal matter," she told her department. That weekend, she sat on our back porch with her morning coffee, watching the sunrise like she always had. But now I understood the calculating intelligence behind those quiet moments. "Rita," I said, joining her with my own mug, "remind me never to get on your bad side." She laughed, the first genuinely relaxed sound I'd heard from her in months. "Jake, you're about to watch someone learn why you should never mess with a cop's family." the smell of fresh coffee mixed with the scent of my condemned sage plants. In 1 week, Constance Pemberton was going to discover that some battles can't be won. Constance's desperation reached new heights over the next week. The woman who'd once maintained her pressed blazer facade was now showing visible cracks in her armor. Monday morning brought a knock at my door from a man claiming to be an electrical safety inspector. He wore no uniform, carried no official credentials, and spoke with a thick accent that suggested English wasn't his first language. "I need to inspect your workshop for code violations," he announced. I asked for his licensing information. He produced a handwritten business card with a phone number that went straight to voicemail. Rita, still maintaining her civilian cover, watched this interaction from the kitchen window. Later, she ran the man's license plate. Turned out he was Danny Pemberton's friend, an unlicensed handyman who'd been hired to find violations that didn't exist. Tuesday brought a new low. I discovered someone had planted dead vegetation near my drought-resistant garden during the night. Fresh brown plants, obviously purchased from a nursery, arranged to look like my native species had contaminated neighboring properties. The security cameras Rita had installed captured everything. Danny Pemberton, creeping around our property at 11:30 p.m., placing dead plants and photographing them with his phone for evidence. "That's criminal trespass, vandalism, and attempted evidence tampering," Rita noted, reviewing the footage. "Kids looking at felony charges." Wednesday escalated to attempted breaking and entering. Our motion sensors triggered at 2:47 a.m., flooding the workshop with harsh white light. The cameras caught Danny trying to plant what appeared to be electrical hazards: loose wire connections, exposed junction boxes, overloaded circuits. The kid wasn't just documenting fake violations anymore, he was creating them. Rita watched the footage with professional detachment. Evidence tampering, burglary, conspiracy to commit fraud, he's building his own prison sentence. I wanted to call the police immediately. Rita counseled patience. "We arrest him now, we get small charges. We let Constance keep escalating, we get the whole conspiracy." The psychological pressure was intense. The smell of fear sweat seemed to permeate our entire neighborhood as more families received harassment. 3 more households had been forced to hire premier landscaping just to stop the violations. Thursday brought financial warfare. Constance delivered a handwritten invoice for $2,847 in accumulated violation fees, threatening foreclosure if payment wasn't received within 15 days. The invoice included charges for inspector costs and administrative time and community impact assessments, all complete fiction. But Rita had been expecting this move. California law requires specific procedures for HOA liens, including formal hearings and proper notice periods. Constance had followed none of them. "She just handed us evidence of attempted extortion," Rita observed. Friday was when Constance completely lost her mind. I was working at a client's house when she appeared, parking across the street and taking photos of my van, my tools, my work. When the homeowner asked about the woman with the camera, Constance introduced herself as an investigative consultant, looking into safety violations by unlicensed contractors. The texture of humiliation was rough against my skin as I had to explain to a paying customer that my HOA president was stalking me. But Saturday was when things got truly ugly. I returned home to find Constance standing in my backyard, measuring distances with her surveyor's wheel while talking on her phone. "Yes, I'm documenting unauthorized modifications to the electrical system," she was saying. "Possible fire hazard, definite code violations." She was trespassing on my property while filing another false report with the city. Rita appeared behind me, still in civilian clothes but radiating authority I'd never noticed before. "Mrs. Pemberton," she called out calmly, "you're on private property without permission." Constance spun around, clutching her phone and surveyor's wheel like weapons. "I'm conducting an official HOA inspection," she sputtered. "HOAs don't have authority to enter private property without consent," Rita replied. "You need to leave immediately." "You can't tell me what to do. I'm reporting both of you for obstruction." Rita's smile was arctic. "Report away, Mrs. Pemberton. I'll be interested to see how that works out for you." That evening, Rita showed me the complete scope of evidence we'd gathered. 6 months of systematic documentation had created an airtight criminal case. Harassment, stalking, fraud, conspiracy, filing false reports, attempted extortion, evidence tampering, and criminal trespass, she listed, plus civil violations of fair housing laws and fiduciary duty. How long could she get? With her pattern of behavior and financial motivation, 3 to 5 years if prosecuted fully. The sound of my phone buzzing interrupted our conversation. Text message from an unknown number. Stop interfering with HOA business or face consequences. Rita looked at the message and shook her head. She just added criminal intimidation to the charges. Sunday morning, Constance called an emergency HOA meeting, claiming our family posed an imminent danger to community safety and demanding immediate property seizure. Rita checked her watch. Right on schedule. The emergency meeting notice appeared on every door in Willowbrook Heights Sunday afternoon. Constance had outdone herself with drama and urgency. Immediate community safety threat, the notice screamed in all caps. Emergency meeting Monday 7 p.m., Community Clubhouse, mandatory attendance for all residents. Yee. The notice detailed alleged criminal electrical activity, environmental contamination, and ongoing safety violations at our property. It demanded an immediate vote for property seizure under emergency powers that didn't actually exist in our HOA bylaws. Rita read the notice with professional interest. She's going full scorched earth. Should we be worried? About Constance? No. About what she's about to do to herself? Absolutely. Monday evening, 23 residents packed into our community clubhouse, the largest HOA meeting attendance in neighborhood history. The smell of stale coffee and industrial carpet filled the small room as people found seats on folding metal chairs. Constance arrived 30 minutes early, setting up what looked like a courtroom. She'd arranged a table at the front with multiple file folders, a laptop projector, and a stack of papers thick enough to be a phone book. Marcus Pemberton skulked near the back exit, clearly uncomfortable about being in the same room as his victims. Danny sat in the corner with a video camera, supposedly documenting the meeting for legal purposes. Rita and I took seats in the back row. She was still maintaining her civilian cover, wearing a simple sweater and jeans, but I could see the tactical awareness in how she'd positioned herself. Clear sight lines, easy access to exits, optimal viewing angle. Constance called the meeting to order at exactly 7 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, we face an unprecedented threat to our community safety, she began, her voice shrill with false authority. The Morrison family has been operating an illegal business, violating environmental regulations, and endangering every resident of this neighborhood. She started her presentation with obviously doctored photos showing electrical connections that didn't exist in my workshop. She claimed my native plants were emitting dangerous toxins that could harm children and pets. She produced a fake fire department inspection report recommending immediate property condemnation. The performance was impressively delusional. Mr. Arlo raised his hand. Mrs. Pemberton, I'm a retired electrical engineer. These photos show connections that violate basic physics. Your objection is noted, Constance snapped, ignoring the technical impossibility. Mrs. Patterson stood up. According to municipal law, HOAs cannot override city code enforcement or condemn private property. We have emergency powers, Constance insisted. No, we don't, Mrs. Patterson replied firmly. I have our bylaws right here. The room's energy shifted as residents realized they were watching someone completely detached from reality. Rita had prepared me for this moment. She'll escalate when challenged, she'd predicted. Narcissists can't handle contradiction. Sure enough, Constance's voice rose to near screaming levels. I don't care what you think the rules are. I am the president of this HOA. The Morrison family is a threat to property values, community safety, and neighborhood standards. The Rodriguez family presented their timeline documenting discriminatory enforcement. Other residents shared their own harassment stories. The pattern was obvious and damning. But Constance wasn't listening anymore. She'd entered what Rita later described as complete psychological break territory. You're all being manipulated, she shrieked. Jake Morrison is a criminal. His wife is probably involved in the conspiracy. That's when she made her final, fatal mistake. I'm calling the sheriff's department right now, she announced, pulling out her phone. I'm reporting all of you for obstruction and conspiracy. She dialed 911 while 23 neighbors watched. This is Constance Pemberton, she said into the phone. I need immediate police response at Willowbrook Heights Clubhouse. Multiple residents are threatening me and obstructing an official HOA investigation. Rita stood up slowly from the back row. The room fell completely silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Mrs. Pemberton, Rita said, her voice carrying new authority. I think there's been a misunderstanding about police involvement. She walked forward with calm, measured steps while residents turned to watch. Even Constance stopped mid-sentence in her phone call. "You see," Rita continued, reaching into her purse, "I am the police." She produced her sheriff's badge, holding it up for everyone to see. "I'm Sheriff Rita Morrison, and this meeting is now evidence in a criminal investigation." The sound of Constance's phone clattering to the floor echoed through the silent clubhouse. Her face went through several shades of purple before settling on ash gray. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Martinez, Thompson," Rita called toward the back of the room. Two uniformed officers entered the clubhouse. I hadn't even noticed them arrive. "Yes, ma'am," Officer Martinez responded. "Please inform Mrs. Pemberton of her rights under Miranda. She's under arrest for filing false police reports, harassment, and conspiracy to commit fraud." The clubhouse erupted in whispers and gasps as Officer Thompson approached Constance with handcuffs ready. "You have the right to remain silent," he began. "No!" Constance screamed, backing against the wall. "This is entrapment, police harassment. She can't investigate her own neighborhood." Rita's voice cut through the hysteria with ice-cold authority. "Mrs. Pemberton, criminal activity doesn't become legal just because it happens near my house. Peace officers have a duty to investigate crimes regardless of location." She opened her evidence files across the front table. 3 months of systematic documentation spread out like a prosecutor's closing argument. "Filing false police reports," Rita announced to the room, "criminal harassment, conspiracy to commit fraud, evidence tampering, attempted extortion." Each charge hit Constance like a physical blow. She slumped against the wall, her pressed blazer facade finally cracking completely. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rita continued, "this is video evidence of Mrs. Pemberton's nephew attempting to plant fake electrical violations in our workshop." She played the security footage on Constance's own projector. 23 neighbors watched Danny Pemberton creeping around our property at 2:47 a.m., carrying tools and creating fake hazards. "That's criminal trespass and evidence tampering," Rita explained. "Both felonies under California law." Marcus Pemberton panicked. He jumped up from his back row seat, pointing at Constance like a drowning man grabbing at a life preserver. "She paid me to do it?" And he blurted out, "The landscaping thing was her idea. She made me give her kickbacks from every job." "Marcus, shut up!" Constance shrieked. But the damage was done. Rita nodded to Officer Martinez, who began reading Marcus's rights as well. "Mrs. Pemberton also attempted to bribe residents," Rita continued, producing audio recordings. "Here's her offering to settle violations for $15,000 in exchange for dropping complaints." Constance's voice played through the clubhouse speakers, clear as day, attempting to extort money for fake community improvements. "That's attempted extortion," Rita announced. "Another felony." The final evidence bomb was financial records. Rita spread bank statements across the table showing Constance's kickback payments, the missing HOA funds, and the fraudulent contractor licensing. $47,000 in embezzled community funds, Rita said, plus additional damages from forced payments to unlicensed contractors, Mr. Arlo stood up, his engineering credentials finally getting the respect they deserved. "Sheriff Morrison, what can we do to help with prosecution?" Mrs. Patterson raised her hand. "I have additional documentation from my late husband's municipal law files." The Rodriguez family offered their timeline of discriminatory enforcement targeting minority residents. One by one, every family that Constance had harassed stepped forward with evidence, witnesses, and testimony. Rita coordinated the community response with military precision. "I need sworn statements from anyone who received violations, paid illegal fees, or witnessed harassment. Officer Thompson will take your information." That's when the local news reporter arrived. Constance had invited Channel 8 to witness her triumph over the Morrison family. Instead, reporter Sarah Kim got the biggest story of her career. This is Sarah Kim reporting live from Willowbrook Heights, where the county sheriff has just arrested the HOA president for what appears to be an elaborate fraud and harassment scheme. Constance made one final desperate attempt to control the narrative. "She's abusing her authority," she screamed at the camera. "This is police corruption. She can't arrest someone for HOA business." Rita faced the news camera with professional calm. "Mrs. Pemberton has been systematically harassing residents, filing false police reports, and operating a fraudulent contracting scheme. Criminal behavior doesn't become acceptable when it happens through an HOA." The handcuffs clicked onto Constance's wrists with a satisfying metallic snap. The sound of her pearl necklace breaking and scattering across the floor provided the perfect soundtrack to her downfall. Marcus Pemberton was arrested for contractor fraud and conspiracy. Danny got charged with criminal trespass, evidence tampering, and stalking. As the three conspirators were led away in patrol cars, the neighborhood erupted in spontaneous applause. "All pending violations are hereby voided," Rita announced to the cheering crowd. "The illegal fee increases are reversed. Your HOA funds will be recovered and distributed to affected families." Mr. Arlo was elected interim HOA president by unanimous voice vote. His first official act was reducing fees back to the original $120 per month. Mrs. Patterson suggested a community barbecue to celebrate. The Rodriguez family offered to organize childcare so parents could attend the legal proceedings. Rita holstered her badge and put her arm around my shoulders. "How does it feel to be married to the county sheriff?" I asked. She grinned. "How does it feel to be married to a woman who just took down the neighborhood terrorist?" The smell of fresh air mixed with the sound of children's laughter as families emerged from 6 months of fear. Justice, it turns out, tastes like victory and smells like freedom. 6 weeks later, Willowbrook Heights looked like a completely different neighborhood. The emergency HOA election was held on a Saturday morning in Mr. Arlo's backyard. 42 residents attended, double our usual voter turnout. Mr. Arlo was officially elected president, Maria Rodriguez became treasurer, and Mrs. Patterson accepted the role of community liaison for municipal affairs. The new board's first official meeting lasted 15 minutes. They reduced fees to the original $120 monthly rate, voided all of Constance's discriminatory rules, and established a transparent complaint process with independent mediation. Constance Pemberton received 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, and a lifetime ban from serving on any HOA board in California. Her community service assignment: picking up litter in public parks while wearing a bright orange vest. Marcus Pemberton paid $15,000 in fines and had his contractor's license permanently revoked. Danny got probation plus mandatory anger management counseling. The court ordered all embezzled funds returned to residents. With damages and interest, each affected family received an average of $800 plus attorney fee reimbursements. But the real victory was what we built with that recovered money. The new playground equipment was designed by neighborhood kids and installed by volunteer residents. My electrical work provided safety lighting and power outlets for community events. Mr. Arlo's engineering expertise ensured everything exceeded safety standards. Rita suggested creating a drought-resistant community garden with educational signage about California water conservation. Mrs. Patterson organized weekly gardening classes for kids and seniors. The legal aid fund we established helps other neighborhoods fight HOA abuse. 3 nearby communities have already used our documentation templates to challenge their own harassment campaigns. Our annual scholarship program awards $2,000 each year to graduating seniors who demonstrate community service. The first recipient was Maria Rodriguez's daughter, who documented discrimination patterns as part of our evidence file. But my favorite community improvement is Saturday morning coffee at the workshop. What started as neighbor consultations about electrical problems became informal town halls where residents discuss issues before they become crises. Rita attends when she's off duty, sharing legal guidance and helping families understand their rights. Her professional expertise has prevented 2 potential harassment situations in neighboring HOAs. Our marriage is stronger than ever. Turns out having a spouse who can handle psychotic neighbors with tactical precision is incredibly attractive. Rita's calm competence during crisis situations makes everyday problems seem manageable. My contracting business thrives with referrals from grateful neighbors. The Rodriguez family hired me to install solar panels, finally approved without committee interference. Mrs. Patterson needed electrical work for her home office. Even Mr. Arlo contracted me for his workshop expansion. Property values increased 12% over the past year, despite Constance's predictions of neighborhood doom. The community's reputation for standing up to corruption attracts families who value integrity over conformity. Constance sold her house at a loss 3 months after her conviction. She moved to a different county, attempted to join another HOA board, and was promptly rejected when residents researched her background online. The annual Community Justice Day festival happens every October, the anniversary of Constance's arrest. Rita provides safety training for vulnerable residents. I donate electrical services for permanent festival infrastructure. Local attorneys offer free legal clinics for HOA disputes. Last year's festival drew visitors from 12 surrounding communities dealing with their own HOA corruption. Our success story has inspired legislation requiring HOA transparency and limiting board authority. The practical lessons we learned apply everywhere. Document everything with timestamps and photos. Know your state's HOA limitation laws. File complaints with multiple agencies simultaneously. Most states have ombudsman programs specifically for HOA disputes. But the deeper lesson is about community solidarity. Individual residents can be intimidated and isolated. Organized neighbors supporting each other become an unstoppable force for justice. Rita still leaves for work in her sheriff's uniform every morning. But now I understand the quiet confidence she's always carried. Some people wear their strength on the outside. Others save it for when their families need protection. What's your worst HOA nightmare? Drop it in the comments. Let's help each other fight back legally and effectively. Hit subscribe for more stories of regular people outsmarting corrupt systems using the law. Next week, I'll tell you about the parking enforcement officer who tried to ticket a federal judge's car during a Supreme Court oral argument. Sometimes justice wears a badge, sometimes it wears a robe, but it always wins in the end.
Thanks for hanging out with us on HOA Stories, where the HOA Karens meet their match. If this story had you cheering or cringing, go ahead and like the video, drop a comment with your reaction, and hit subscribe so you're ready for the next wild HOA tale.